On this video, I am doing what we might call a short polyglot or diglot reading of Psalm 2, verse 7 to verse 9 from the Hebrew and the Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint text. And I'll be looking at the grammar as I go through phrase by phrase. So we're in verse 7. In Psalm 2, it's the anointing of a king. We're not sure what king in Israel was being anointed. Secondly, the nations are revolting against God's anointed king on his coronation day. And then, furthermore, the Lord is sitting in heaven, and he's decreed that the king will reign from Zion, that his king will reign. And so, in light of that, he is laughing at the efforts to overthrow his decree, showing God's sovereign intention. It's interesting as we look at this, the first part of this, I'm applying it to the New Testament as I go through, has application to the cross. We saw this in, I believe it was the second or the first video, Why Did the Nations Rage and the Peoples Meditate a Vain Thing? The kings of the earth station themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. And in Acts chapter 4, we saw that was applied to the cross and to the work of Christ on the cross. And that was something that God had ordained, we're told in that passage. We now move to verse 7, and I'll read it in the Hebrew and then look at the grammar and then do it in the Greek Septuagint as well. Asapra el hok, I will tell concerning the decree. Adonai amar Eli beniyata. The Lord said unto me, my son, you are. Asapra is from safar, to narrate or tell. It's a PL, imperfect, first person singular from safar. It has that comets, the pathak yod, hatef comets, followed by a pathak, and then the doubling of the middle radical and the shava under that, which is your PL pointing. So I will declare the decree. The king is speaking now. Adonai Amar Eli, the Lord said unto me, Amar is the cow perfect, third masculine singular from Amar. Beniyata, my son, you are. Very emphatic here. It's sort of like, you are my son. And Ani Hayom Yeliticha, I, today, I have begotten you. Notice Ani is emphatic. We would not need it because Yelaticha, the suffix T is first person singular suffix, but it's emphatic. I have begotten you. And notice here, Yeliticha from Yalad is the cow perfect first person singular from Yalad. Notice the T is your first person singular suffix, and Ha is your pronominal suffix, second masculine singular. So I today have begotten you. And this is the kind of language that is used of the begetting of a king. So it's familiar language in the ancient Near East. I want to read the Septuagint now in verse 6, actually verse 7. We did verse 6, so we're in verse 7. Actually, verse 6 in the Septuagint, I was installed king by him, ego de katestathein basilus hup autu epi Sion, upon Mount Zion, ta hagion autu, his holy mountain. Notice the king is speaking earlier in the translation from the Septuagint, declaring the commandment of the ordinance of the Lord. So now we come to the Septuagint that parallels what we read in Hebrew. Kurios epe pras me. The Lord said to me. Epe is from lego. It's the aorist indicative active third person singular. Huios mu esu. My son, you are. A is your present indicative active second person singular from me. So my son, you are. Ego, semeran, I. It's emphatic in the Greek too. Today, semeran gegeneka se. I have begotten you. Gegeneka is from genao. It's the perfect indicative active first person singular from genao. If you're following in the Septuagint, notice the reduplication of the gamma and the gap and the kappa. If we were using lua, it would be leluka as a model. I have begotten you. And se is the direct object, accusative, direct object, second person personal pronoun. So then we move on to the next verse in the Hebrew. And it reads, Sha'al mimeni ve'etana goyim nachalatecha va'ahuzatecha afse adas. Ask from me, and I will give the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth, ahuzatecha, for your possession. For your possession, the ends of the earth. Sha'al is a cow imperative, masculine singular from sha'al. So ask from me, min mimeni is from min ani. Notice the noon of the min by progressive assimilation is going into the mim. That's why we have the doggish forte. N is a hinge, and E is your pronominal suffix, first person singular. So ask from me, the etana, and I will give. Ve is just your conjunction, and etana is from the root natan. It's the cow imperfect, first person singular. Entana becoming etana. I will give. And notice Natan, the noon, is assimilating into the tav here by progressive assimilation. So entana becomes etana with the doubling of the tav with the doggish forte. And I will give goyim, the nations, nachalatecha, your inheritance. Notice the king is promised the nations and the uttermost parts of the earth as his inheritance. And again, as a Christian minister, I see this referring to Christ ultimately, because Jesus will be king over the world and is king, but will be king when he returns someday. He is the Melech Melechim, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. So it goes on and says, in the end, and for your possession, from ahuzah, meaning possession. It's in construct here with ha, your pronominal suffix, second masculine singular, and your possession, afse adats, the ends of the earth. From Ephes, here you have a plural noun in construct with adats. So for your possession, the ends of the earth, referring, I think, ultimately in its final application to Christ. Then as we go on to the Septuagint, it reads, I tesai, as paramu from me, kai doso soy ethne tain kleronamiansu, and I will give to you the nations for your inheritance, kai tain kataskasinsu, and the ends of the earth, and for your possession, tain kataskasin su ta perata teskes, the ends of the earth. Notice here, I tesai is your aorist imperative, second masculine singular. I think of lusai, lusasto, lusastai, lusasto san, if we were using luo. So as for me, kai doso, doso is from didumi. Didumi, doso, educa, deduca would be the principal parts. And so this is your future indicative active first person singular from didumi. And I will give to you the nations for your inheritance, kai, tain, and the for your possession, ta perita tesges, and the ends of the earth for your possession. So there is this promise of universal rule. But again, I think the realization of that, I believe, looking at New Testament application, is when Christ, who I believe the New Testament understands as Hamashiach, the Messiah, when he comes back, he will indeed be have an inheritance over all things. The writer of Hebrews says, made him heir of all things. So let's move on to the verse 9. And it's interesting as we think about the phrase, this day have I begotten you. I'm reminded in the New Testament of the resurrection of Christ. Paul makes that application recorded by Luke in Acts 13. The day of begetting was the resurrection, Christ entering in to his eternal kingship. Then we move on to verse 7. Teruim b'shevet barzel, kikli yotzer tenapatzem. You will, and this can be translated shepherd or crush, depending. If it's from a double ayin root, ra'ah, followed by the pronominal suffix, third masculine plural, it would be a cow imperfect second person masculine singular from ra'ah, double ayin, with aim, the pronominal suffix, third masculine plural. So you will crush them or break them. B'shevet barzel, with a scepter of iron. Shevet is in construct with barzel, and kikli yotzer tenapatzem, as vessel, as a vessel of a potter. A yotzer is a potter, from yatzar, to form. And so, as a potter's vessel, tenapatzem, you will break them to pieces. or dash them to pieces. From nafats, to dash, to pieces. Notice we have a PL, imperfect, second masculine singular from nafats, followed by aids, third masculine plural pronominal suffix. Notice here the shava pathat in the doubling of the middle radical in the pay here is looking at a PL stem. So you will dash them to pieces as a potter's vessel. Just a word about teruim again. If it's a double ayin, it would be to crush or break. And that would agree with the second clause. As a vessel of a potter, you will dash them to pieces. However, if the word is from ra'ah, not a double ayin, but a lamed hey, it would mean to shepherd. And it would read tir-aim. If we took that reading from teruim, it would read tir-aim, you will shepherd them. And the Hebrew did not have vowels when it was first written. So the early translation could have been read, you will shepherd them. And we'll see that's the way the Septuagint does read it, tir'aim. So if that's the case, it would be from the root ra'ah, a lamed hey with a final hey, instead of a double ayin, ra'ah with two ayins, which would mean crush. So again, the New Testament applies it to Christ in the book of Revelation. You will shepherd them with an iron scepter in Revelation 19, when Christ returns as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And that would agree with the Septuagint reading, which I want to read right now. It reads, Poimanes autus in hlapto sidera, hoskuas kerameos suntripses autus. You will shepherd them with an iron scepter. Now it's interesting. Some want to translate this, you will rule them. And shepherd can have that meaning, to rule over. So you will, but I would just render it, you will shepherd them, future indicative active, second person singular from poi mino, becoming poi manes. You will shepherd them with a rod of iron. In rabdo sidera, in taking the dative here, rabdo, a rod of iron. Hoskuas kerameos, as a vessel of a potter, suntripses autus, you will dash them to pieces. From suntribo, it is the future indicative active second person singular from suntribo. And it's interesting as we look at this, you could, meaning you will shepherd them with an iron rod. And again, it's looking at a king who has the name of a shepherd, but he will judge the enemies and take his subjects, his people, and care for them or shepherd them. So it can have a double meaning. That is, I think, ra'ah, the final hay form, or rendering it as ra'ah, lamed hay, and following the Septuagint, you will shepherd them, poi manes, with an iron scepter. So it is interesting as we look at this, and then it goes on, you will shepherd them with an iron rod as vessels of a potter sun tripses. We already looked at that from sun tribo, future indicative active second person singular, which would be you will break them and dash them in pieces as a vessel of a potter. So let me stop here. Again, I would see this in its final fulfillment as an application in the New Testament to Jesus Christ, a tremendous Messianic psalm with what I would call a double meaning, having its own historical meaning in a limited way, but in its final form, in a literal way, of Christ, who on the cross the nations were raging, Acts 4, and this day have I begotten you, Acts 13, looking at the resurrection of Christ, and then finally being heir of all things, Hebrews 1, he's been made heir of all things. And then in Revelation 19, at the second coming, it is said that Christ will shepherd the nation with an iron rod. In other words, speaking of his rule as the final King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So it's a beautiful psalm that I think is what I would call an indirectly messianic psalm, having a double fulfillment, looking at a historical coronation king, maybe being a king being coronated, maybe like David, but in its ultimate fulfillment, looking at Christ, the Messiah, whom I understand to be the Messiah, and his reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords.